Wij wachten nog even op één spreekster van jullie die nog gezinnig moet worden. Dus tot zij er is, kunnen wij nog niet beginnen.
Maar dan moet ik even zeggen, oké, ik ga even heel even zonder microfoon. Oh, wel. Wel met een microfoon. Heel handig. We zitten allemaal met smart te wachten op Chimamanda Adichie. Ze komt over 2 minuten. Maar het leek me handig om dat even te communiceren. Alles, als het goed is ze nu onderweg. En dan gaan we beginnen. Misschien moeten we allemaal even jumping jacks doen. Een beetje gewoon nog een klein punt. Misschien dat er al mensen zijn die willen twitteren. We hebben een hashtag Adichie. @Atria Nieuws. Het staat hier op de balie. Er is wifi. Even kijken. Wifi is hotspot. Atria hotspot. Hoofdletter W. Welkom bij Atria. En je ziet het ook daarachter op de balie. Staat het wachtwoord ook even uitgeschreven. Hoofdletter W. Welkom bij hoofdletter A. Atria. Deze microfoon is weer ingeklapt, Niels. Terwijl ik had hem juist klaargezet. Ja, maar Simone gaat een column doen.
Noortje.
Good afternoon and welcome to you all at Atria. And if I may interrupt the conversation between Nancy and Chimamanda, a very warm and very special welcome, of course, to Chimamanda Adichie. We are equally honored as pleased to receive you here at Atria, the National Institute on Gender Equality and Women's History. And we know you have a busy schedule, so we really appreciate it. And as you probably have heard, we are streaming also this event, so that because we had limitations here, and that was also a request, but we really want to give many women the opportunity to meet you virtually in this way. As you all know, Chimamanda Adichie is an appraised author of many works of art and an indomitable and eloquent champion for women's rights, so that makes it special for us. And also for me personally, because I must say that your work, in its own brilliance and uniqueness, evokes memories for me of other authors like Toni Morrison and Audre Lorde that have meant a lot to me to help me understand the world of women and black women in particular. And notably the, let's say, complex arena of difference and power that is the reality of black and white women in this time. And that is something we have to acknowledge in order to engage in a dialogue. As an institute, Atria, with a library, as you can see here, an archive and a research department, we aim to contribute to further this dialogue, to further an intersectional understanding of the position of women, all women, in all their diversity. That's a complex mission. I want to show you an example, since we're an archive, of an older relic. This is a fan that is coming from China, that was given to by Sophia Chang, a Chinese suffragette at the beginning of the 20th century. And she gave this as a gift to Aletta Jacobs, who was traveling the world. She was a Dutch suffragette, who was traveling at that point the world together with Carrie Chapman Catt and Jane Addams, American suffragettes, to further the message of women's suffrage. And I think this fan symbolizes for Atria that complex history we have, because it's equally, let's say, a relic of a rather colonial enterprise that they engaged on to sort of spread the news across the world, as it was a genuine attempt to further the position of women. And I think in the 21st century, it is those layers that we need to acknowledge when we want to engage in a dialogue. I think we need to reflect on how we document also and make accessible the contemporary history of women, and particularly the contemporary history of black and migrant women, because in the 21st century, that is an effort that takes extra work to reflect on what white privilege means and how that has transpired in history, with not only white privilege, but also Eurocentric values. That's a deeply rooted reality that we have to face. In the historical work that we conduct at Atria, we need to be aware, as we regularly say, and we not only need to be aware, but also show that we stand on the shoulders of our foremothers. For me, Audre Lorde is one of them. Therefore, I wish to end with a few lines from her poem Outlines. Lines that were read to me by my beloved, who had fled from apartheid and knew what it would take to engage in a true dialogue across racial boundaries. She knew that way before I really knew. These lines, I think, apply to all attempts to understand our lives, but also our work, including at Atria. Light catches two women on a trail. together, embattled by choice, craving an agenda with tempered lightning and no certainties. We mark tomorrow, examining every cell of the past for what is useful, stoked by furies. We were supposed to absorb by 40. Still we grow, more precise with each usage. Like falling stars or torches, we print code names upon our scars, over each other's resolutions, our weaknesses, no longer hateful. When women make love beyond the first exploration, we meet each other, knowing. In a landscape of our lives, attempts to understand. I want to thank you, Chimamanda, for helping us in our attempts to understand. And the floor is now to Simone van Saarloos for our column. Simone.
Hi. We are matching René in green. I don't know what that says, but anyway. This is a one-perspective story, a one-directed story. This is a story meant for a white audience. Looking into this room, I think they might be the minority today. And I'm saying they, where I probably should say us or we, since I'm not planning to color up my voice like Naomi Wolf did when she was in Amsterdam to represent her book, My Vagina, or not My Vagina, a new biography. When Wolf was criticized on the fact that she didn't voice a very intersectional, inclusive feminism, a feminism including queer and trans women, a feminism including non-white, non-secular and non-Western women, she expressed her grief in quite a particular manner. She started to sum up the foreign or non-Western elements in her genes, claiming her ancestors traced back to Turkey, Lebanon and Afghanistan. The point she here wanted to make was that you cannot always see a person's identity. She underlined this by revealing that she suffers from chronic back pain, which allows her to speak about disability as well, even though her handicap is not visible. She stresses that there are non-visible truths in this world, and I praise this. I think it encourages us to look at a more narrative-based approach to understand the world. Not what you are, but what you experience is important. However, the non-visible should not become a strategic guerrilla tool in fighting about who can and cannot speak. Her eagerness to claim all possible identity roles and to belong to every us and we by summing up her ancestry is somewhat perverse, it seems to me, as it pretends it is as if there isn't another option, for example, making space and sharing the floor. Unlike Naomi Wolf, I have no clue what my exact background is, as I have never been asked, no, but where are you really from? Or where are you from? I started by saying that this story is a story for a white audience, but you did not turn a deaf ear on me. And I imagine that a non-white audience is used to listening to stories meant for white audiences. We know from Adichie's We Should All Be Feminist, or the importance of different stories, which are 2 TED Talks. We know that her first stories she wrote about snow. Well, there is no snow in Nigeria, but there is British literature. And yes, sometimes, or maybe often, ears are closed to ignore a woman's voice, but my voice has never been ignored because it is white. What being a white voice means, the meaning of the whiteness in a certain story, is not even questioned or analyzed. The same as gender is not questioned in a story about a male protagonist. The white story, or the male story, is seen as a general individual story, and mark the paradox in general individual story. A little while ago, I got a call from Atria Institute, where we are today. Chimamanda Adichie is coming to the Netherlands. Did I want to interview her? Yes! I said, of course, I love her work. But I also questioned, am I the right person to do it? And the organizer told me, if any white person, it should be you. Now, I don't know what this means, but if someone says, if any, then you, it always sounds like a great compliment and undeniable. I said yes, but it occupied my mind. If I was the white person to do it, why did it need to be a white person in the first place? A great funny Anusha Nazuma, who is sitting here, contacted Clarice Gagar, who is your moderator today. You will see her in a minute. And Anusha said that she wanted to contact Atria and question their lineup. Well, it is not my job to voice Anusha's critique, but since she helped me formulate what I had already felt uncomfortable about, let's do it in short. During her visit, Adichie has 2 public performances, one today and one yesterday, and both public interviewers were led by white interviewers. Last night, Nina Weijers, me this afternoon. And this, Anusha underlined, was not a one-time thing. In November, the international acclaimed author Zadie Smit will be in Amsterdam and publicly interviewed by Joost de Vries. And he's a white male, and I can tell you, since you learned yesterday that cis male, what cis male means, he's a white cis male. Should I explain this for the live stream? Google it. Anusha mentioned that white interviewers and media makers are keen to interview international acclaimed non-white authors, but they pay little attention to Dutch non-white authors. And I heard yesterday also from Nancy that, for example, when Alice Walker came to the Netherlands or Toni Morrison, it was the same thing happening, like now. And this was 40 years ago. Also, Anusha mentioned the Anton de Kom lecture, which is a yearly held in honor of the Surinamese writer and activist Anton de Kom. And the lecture will be held by a white man for the 6th time in 8 years, and gender ratio is the same, so 6 males on 8 lectures. Well, I don't know what organizers are thinking. From my perspective, as a freelance author and white feminist, I have heard the arguments about all-male or near to all-male panels in academia, media, and politics. They are just not there. They all say no. The capable ones are quite scarce. I'm sure there are capable ones, but they are not very good in formulating their ideas clearly and calmly. Now, when you do say no indeed, because maybe you have been invited another time again for something you don't even know anything about, so when you do say no, you're told you should take one for the team. The women's team, I mean. Well then, invite the team. They will say, all women say no. Did you really ask all women? I'm sure similar excuses circulate when it comes to all white or near to all white panels, talk shows, tables, etc. But there are lists of names, diverse in color and in gender, circulating through the hands of organizers and committees. Every "they are just not there" accounts for there's a systematic blind spot there. But I promise to keep this a one-perspective story, and I cannot speak as an organizer or policymaker. So I question, what can a white media maker do? I admit, I have been mostly a yes and yeah sayer. I have not often said, invite the team, invite all women. I said yes when Atria called, and I was honored. And when Anusha called to express her questions and criticism, I was grateful. And together with her, Clarice, and Nancy, we decided that Nancy Jouwe should perform as today's interviewer. My earliest feminist awakening came from reading American feminists like Maya Angelou and Alice Walker. I heard them say, speak out, let your voice be heard. Or Audre Lorde, tell people who you are, write your own story, don't let other people write it. And last Monday I was at the Opzij event, and for Chimamanda, Opzij is a feminist magazine, has been around for a long time, and they have selected the 100 most influential women in the Netherlands. In the hallways, the portraits of the 100 women were printed and displayed, and maybe they printed the pictures in black and white to cover up the fact that there were no non-white influential women in this list that they made. Two. You are better at counting. 2 out of 100. Anja knows the facts. They too spoke about speaking out and owning your space. The discourse of white feminism is claim your space, but does taking space also sometimes mean making space? Or what happened to sharing space? Dear white audience, and I'm looking at the camera now, should we not ask also, when and where do we have the power to say no? Is power being able to say, invite the others, call the rest? And with others, I don't mean the other, I mean the rest. As a youngster in my favorite sports, ice hockey and rugby, I would encounter rapid growth within the team and on national level because there were so few women. In school, I would be selected for doing speeches or debates because most girls had soft voices and kept quiet. Even before I knew about political structures of inequality, I grew up thinking that I gained from someone else's lack or absence. And I do not believe this can be the meaning of success. In a world with many people, the presence of others must never be a synonym for competition. The presence of others itself must become the meaning of success. Peacemakers or NGO diplomats are often heard saying, focus on the similarities instead of the differences. But those who take the time and study difference close and engaged enough, and also acknowledge that they are probably somewhat different, will experience the connection between differences instead of forcefully making something that's different similar to what they already know, which is, it seems, a process of identity appropriation. And I warned that this was going to be a one perspective story, but let me be stupid and make a claim on behalf of us, because that's the power of the microphone, of us here in the room as young media makers. This is a remark for the committees and curators and organizations that depend on independent thinkers and freewheelers. Please do not ask us to share your event or product on social. Even if we love the product, like a book, don't. You are monetizing our innate willingness to share. If we like something, we will spread the word. If we applaud something, we will make it heard. If we have ideals, we will convince others. Please do not curb our enthusiasm with your yearn to make profit. Then, as a final remark, there was some hesitation beforehand whether these remarks about the process behind this afternoon would overshadow the conversation with Chimamanda. I would say no conversation can ever happen without the structures making it possible, making the conversation possible. Language, people, questions, listeners, chairs, some water, hopefully, for you guys. And gratefully, a conversation doesn't allow for a one perspective story. Thank you.
Thank you for the spoken column, Simone van Saarloos. Well, welcome audience. I see many beaming faces. Everyone is, hyper excited, trying to stay calm and cool and collected. Welcome to everyone in the live stream, and a very, very warm welcome to you, our special guest for this afternoon. Whoa. Is it the? Okay, well, let's not get bogged down by technology. You're here. Let's start with asking how are you today? Because it's been a grueling...
I'm tired.
You're tired, right? Well, you look calm and elegant. We can also...
A good concealer helps.
Right.
We can talk about it.
Let's share
NAS
tips.
is generally good, and NAS gets our undertones. Black up is good.
Write that down. Jot that down. Pearls of wisdom coming at you by the minute.
Yeah, I'm happy to be. I just wish I were a bit more awake because I was really looking forward to this, and I wanted to be my most present self. So, but
Mhm.
I'm just a bit jet lagged, but really happy to be here. Really,
Yeah.
really interested in particular. I mean, I know we don't have a lot of time, so can I just say that I also really want to hear from people.
Yeah.
I mean,
Let's do that.
I want to learn about what it means to be.
We're also running a bit later, so we'll do. Yeah, am I good? We'll cut it down to like 15 minutes. Have a 15-minute conversation, and we'll then strike up the conversation with the room because everyone's dying to talk to you. Everyone being a lot of women and one man, so.
Yeah,
Much more.
But notice the token man.
Yes,
Why
but
is he here?
he'll let himself be heard later on, I'm sure. I think this is your third time in the Netherlands, is it? You were here in 2011 in Spui 25. The John Adams Institute invited you. Yesterday you were at the Brainwash Festival, so you've been here quite some times, and the rooms got bigger, and every time you came, it was sold out like that. So it's definitely, you being a star really is what makes people also come to you and listen to you. So I think we're feeling very privileged here that we're sitting in such a small gathering, but I can imagine it's also nice for you to have a real conversation with, having people near you.
Yeah, but people who consider themselves feminists. That's why I'm here.
Let's have a show of hands. Who considers themselves feminists here in the room?
So that's why I came.
Ah.
Or I need to talk to my two sisters who are sitting here in front because they seem to think that. Okay.
Oh, okay. But you were thinking. We saw the thinking 2 seconds. Yeah. Okay. So, well, as I was preparing, I thought there's so many things I want to talk to you about, but what we're really going to do is try and focus on the purpose of today's session, which is on looking at feminism as a source of inspiration, and how women in the media, as we are sitting here, can strengthen their work in this respect, to, let's say, up their feminist game, if you will. Before we go to your work, I just wanted to briefly touch upon the fact that, well, most of the people here, being journalists and all, are quite versed in who you are. But what struck me in an interview that you gave a couple of years ago with Saada Norhusen, who interviewed you, is that you live in Nigeria half of the time, and you live in the US, where you also studied. But in that interview, you expressed how you felt black for the first time when you came into the US. How did that work? How was that for you?
Interesting. I hadn't thought of myself as black in Nigeria because I didn't need to.
Everyone looked like you. And was
Almost
like you.
everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also just that blackness was the norm,
Right.
And that blackness wasn't weighed down with any kind of meaning. It just was.
Mm-hmm.
There were other things weighed down with meaning. So ethnicity, religion.
Right.
So I grew up very much aware that I was Igbo and Catholic Christian, but never black. And then I came to the US, and I just felt as though the thing that's interesting, I think, in particular about America, is that it thrusts identity on you. You have to. You don't actually have a choice. And I remember in my first few months resisting being called black because I was very set on my identity as Nigerian and increasingly African. I also kind of became African in America. Because in Nigeria, I was just like, Africa. Africa was a vague thing. But in the US, suddenly I became this card-carrying African where I could speak up for my sisters in Namibia. And then becoming black was more complex. And, because I like to say that it's the question or the problem isn't black. It's the baggage that comes with blackness.
Yeah, it's a loaded term.
Yes.
Loaded with
and
connotations that are quite negative.
Yes. And for me, that was a discovery because I had come from a place where black achievement was normal. I had come from a place where authority figures were black.
Right.
And to come to the US and in my first writing class to write the best essay, and my professor was surprised when he said, "Who is Adichie?" Well, they call me Adichie, so I think he thought I was maybe Italian-American from the name. And then he looked surprised, and it was just sort of one of those moments I realized he's surprised because I'm black. And he's surprised because he doesn't expect the best essay to be written by a black person. And it's one of those moments where, you know, it annoyed me, it amused me, because with my, you know, sort of Nigerian smugness, I thought surely he must know that black people are very intelligent. And so that, you know, but it also for me was the beginning of a learning experience, because I think that has to be what became the catalyst for wanting to then learn. I went and I started to read African American history and to read about blackness and to come to a place where I identify very happily as black in a way that many of my friends who haven't left Nigeria don't, right? And I think, so there's a sense in which blackness is a choice and isn't a choice in America. I mean, there's the blackness that is thrust on you, but I think there's also a blackness that you have to make the choice to take on. And I've made the choice to take it on, which means that I feel a kind of kinship, which, I mean, I'm not African American. There's certain things I will never understand in the way that people who have had an African American experience will understand. But at the same time, there's a kinship, I feel.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that when we shift to the Netherlands. But first of all, let's move on to your work and your message. Because aside from you being highly successful novelist, you've been also speaking out on several social issues, if you will. And your feminist TED Talk in 2012 became a big hit. 2 years later, it was published as an essay. Now it has been translated into Dutch. Swedish school kids get it for free. We're not that far yet in the Netherlands, I have to say. I think Atria
I feel
did.
sorry for those poor kids.
Yeah. But had you anticipated that?
No, of course not.
I mean, it was crazy.
No, I think it's still crazy. I mean, but generally in a good way. Right? When I gave that talk, I really thought that nobody would care. I remember thinking, these people are going to give me an evil look, but I'm going to say it anyway, and then I'm going to leave the stage. And I was thinking that because I was talking to a room full of people who were mostly African or friends of Africa, and and I realized that feminism is not a word that is popular anywhere in the world, but particularly not in my continent, where it is seen as some sort of crazy Western thing, where white women burn bras. And so I just didn't think it would, go down well. But at the same time, it was something I cared very much about. And my brother and my cousin, my best friend Ike, who were organizing the conference, had said to me, come and talk, because we need you to come and talk. And I said, I don't have anything to talk about. I've already talked about the danger of a single story. And then they said to me, but there's the one thing you lecture everybody about. Which I hadn't quite realized that's what they thought about me. But so apparently I'd been lecturing people about feminism and I didn't know. So I thought, oh, right, that's true. That's the other thing that I get really,
excited about.
So I was pleasantly surprised, first at the standing ovation, because I really genuinely was surprised. And, and I think what I like to think, and what's happened afterwards, the way that people have sort of seemed to respond to it, I like to think that it's not so much that I said anything particularly new, it's that I said what people were already thinking.
Yeah.
But that in some ways it's giving voice to something that people already were thinking.
It's in the room, it's in the air.
Yeah, already were aware of.
Yeah. So how has feminism been an inspiration to you? And why is it important right now in this day and age, do you think?
I think it's always been important. And it's also sometimes difficult for me to talk about feminism as a separate thing. In other words, I don't sort of have days when I put on my feminist hat, and it's an integral part of who I am. It's that I look at the world very much aware that there's gender injustice, and I live it. I live it because because I have small and subtle experiences that are very clear to me would not happen if I weren't female, just as I also have big experiences. So how is it I don't know if I can answer that. I just think that it's the way I look at the world. I think that there's a part of me that just deeply wants things to change. I want things to change. And so what I find most moving is when someone says to me, you know, because of what you said, I'm thinking differently about something, or I want to act differently. That, for me, that's it. That makes me happy. I'm still working on some members of my family, but I've also managed to get some to.
What's interesting is that you purposely call yourself a feminist, and I think it has helped definitely a younger generation of Black women to also embrace that term in a way. We saw it yesterday evening, where somebody raised a question in the audience where a lot of Black women actually feel very uncomfortable with the term and do associate it with white women and of a certain class and of a certain sort of reductionist view on what type of freedom we need and want and what we should focus on.
Yeah, I made that choice, and it's because for me, it's a dictionary word that I own. I decided to take ownership of it. I think everyone should take ownership of it. But at the same time, of course, I don't want to be flippant about the reason for the discomfort that Black women feel. But I also want to say that I felt discomfort about what became the alternative words, like womanism. I wasn't comfortable with, because instead of made me think
happy you're saying that.
Of some motherly mystical thing that I just thought. Right? Not my thing.
Right with you there.
So so the dictionary, I thought, feminism in the dictionary says equality of men and women. I'm going to take this and own it. And my great-grandmother was a feminist, and she did not need white women in 1960s America to tell her that.
There you go.
So, and I think also that there are many women, I think, who agree with the sentiment, but have a problem with the word. And I think it's just easier to have a word around which to rally, in then talking about the diversity within feminism, because I think of feminisms, really. I think there's a fundamental starting point, which is you have to agree in the equality of men and women. I also actually would like to talk about another version, which I call feminism light, which I think is bullshit, which happens quite a bit. I don't know if, I think particularly my African sisters, the Black women, the kind of feminism that tells you, of course you should have a job, but always ask your husband for permission. Right. Of course you should do your own thing, but your husband has to allow you. Right? That for me is just such... all right. No.
Yeah. We get it. Okay. Let's shift a little bit to the Netherlands because of time, but also connected to another great TED Talk that you gave a little bit earlier in 2009, which spoke about the single story. Explain us again what you meant by that and why it made such an impact.
I don't even know why it made even that too. Honestly, that was kind of different because that came from terror. I had been asked to do this talk, and they had said to me, they never ask writers, they're asking you. Bill Clinton would be in the front row, No
pressure.
Yeah, and then I went and looked at what other people had done, and they had started schools, and they had built, elaborate windmills, and I just thought, my God. Right, and I remember being in Lagos and calling my friend and saying to her, "Can we start a school?"
Right.
So that I can go and tell them I started a school. And so really at the end, I also remember thinking, and this is something in general that I try to live by now, is, talk about what I care about. If it's true, and if it's sincere, and if nobody cares, I will still sleep well at night. Yeah. Right. So I decided to talk about what I care about, and I care about it because I think it's so important. Because as a reader, as a writer, I'm very aware, very alert to how stories are about power, how they're so linked, how the stories that are told, how often the fact that the story that gets told first becomes the story. And it's about power. And I wanted to hopefully try and get people to think about that. And again, I just was really surprised at how it took off because, and I remember actually watching it. I had to watch a bit of it. I gave a talk and they played it and I just cringed. Because I looked terrified in the beginning and I was like, why did nobody give me powder? My forehead was shiny. I was like, what the hell? But that meant a lot to me as well. So,
but it's really also taking issue with this very reductionist view that people have of Africans, basically. And it dehumanizes all of us in a way. And I think it really resonates to this day. Many people refer to it still. And I think, again, the timing was excellent because we needed to hear this.
And I also remember thinking that in the audience, because the TED sort of enterprise, at the time at least, was one in which all the African stories fit a certain mold.
Right.
So it was sort of the African person who had been a child soldier. It was the African person who had been given aid to build a well in Botswana or something.
Yeah.
It was, and I realized standing there, I didn't fit. I didn't fit the way Africa had been presented at those conferences.
Right.
And I remember feeling an almost tactile sense of resistance at the beginning, because I think they were looking at me like, you're supposed to be asking us to help you. But you're telling us to rethink how we think.
Yeah, you're not playing your role.
Yeah, so there was that. And I think maybe the reason it then became a thing afterwards is partly because of that. Because, I think I was speaking to an Africa that exists. In other words, it's not that that what I was saying was that I think that many other Africans who feel as I do, but they hadn't been at TED. They hadn't been asked, right? So I think that's also partly why.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, part of your success is also that you, feminist insights, you make it palpable. You make it, people understand it because of the, also the way you have your family members be part of the examples that you give. So you make it very, everyday and very, for people to connect also what you're saying, which moves beyond, I think, what a lot of academic feminists lack is making it connect to the masses, if you will, because that's what you've been doing. I think that's really key in your work.
And I have to say, it's also deliberate. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I
Does it have to do with the fact that you studied communication?
No, because actually what happened with this is what's wonderful about American college systems is that I just took random classes, and at the end I had to declare a major, and communication was the only thing that came close to fitting all the random classes I had taken. Right. So it's not like I actually studied something useful. But no, it's not that. It's more that my feminism comes from a place of I think I was saying sort of half jokingly that there's a bit of the Messiah complex in my feminism. Yeah. I want to save the world from itself. But also I want a better world. Mm-hmm. And in using everyday examples, it's my way of saying feminism matters. It matters. It's not. And with all love and respect to academics and cis theory, you do realize there's just ever so slight sarcasm in my tone. But that's the other thing. I think I wouldn't survive in academic feminism because I don't think I would know how to follow all the rules of what how you're supposed to say things and all
totally
of that. I couldn't survive.
Yeah, no,
no, but I really do very much want to change things, and using my family, they don't always like it, is simply a way of saying, because it's also a personal journey for me, right? It's also that I want to talk about the things that I'm unlearning,
right?
And how gender is about taking on all of these things, and the idea that even the idea of gender roles is sometimes you find yourself performing things that actually go against your own well-being, but you've been so conditioned. And so for me, it's about questioning that and having that journey and getting to a place where there's just a bit more justice for women.
Last question, because we really are running out of time. You could say in the Netherlands there's a sort of a renewed interest in black feminists. It goes hand in hand with the recurrence of feminism in general, and the Black Pete is racism campaign that you've sort of heard about a little bit, I gathered. It now has evolved in what you could say a second wave anti-racist movement, which also is quite intersectional. So I think we're living in a very interesting time, and the importance of a paradigm shift and criticizing current power dynamics is really what is on the agenda right now in the Netherlands, I think.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Too academic.
Yeah. But I do have a question.
Go.
Where does the fact that and I'm very curious about this, that the norm is for women to work part-time in this country.
Oh, God.
And you know,
How long do you have?
No, but really, here's why I find it interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In Nigeria, there are debates about women and cooking. You know, the wife has to cook for the husband. But women work. I mean, and by which I mean women who have access to work. The question, there's never really a question. There's sort of, so it's women work and do the domestic work. Right. Apparently in the Netherlands, are women taking on part-time job because they cannot do the work and domestic? In other words, they're expected to do the domestic work. In other words, the Netherlands is so retrograde that it's really about domestic work.
It's that, but
domestic work being about being born with a vagina.
Right. But I think it's also more white women who actually do part-time work, and not the black women necessarily.
What do black women do?
Full-time work. Work full-time.
Well, hold on. So then we're talking about the part-time job being a consequence of privilege.
Yes. Yes.
Because
I think we could.
Dual salary.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's married women.
Who actually,
very interesting.
So there you have it. Okay, well, I think we should give it. I so want to talk on with you, but well, maybe one thing. We're here at Atria, the Women's Archive. There's a lot of black archives of black organizations and black feminists in this building. A new generation is trying to suss it out, basically. And what could, in your opinion, humble opinion, do Atria as an archive do in terms of also pursuing a more inclusive type of feminism, in terms of not having the story just be white?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. So who's? I mean, how is Atria run? Is there a board? Who's on the board? No, I asked this thing because I think it's easy. I mean, we can all sort of just, let's have a debate about, but it's just basic practical things like who's on the board, who makes the decisions. It matters. It matters because I think unless there's, and it matters not just for places like this, but in general, unless you have more producers, you will not have more cultural content that has black people. Shonda Rhimes making TV shows in America has changed the landscape. It took a black woman to realize that it's actually possible, to have a black woman be the babe rather than the sassy friend, right? And it works because people of every color are watching the shows.
Ava DuVernay is another wonderful filmmaker in that respect.
And so I guess the answer for me would be, who's making the decisions. I remember in the U.S., I think it was when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were contesting, and U.S. polling the category would be black people, Hispanics, women. And I used to think, well, where do I fit? Because I'm sort of black people, but I'm also women. But of course, what's interesting is that for them, for polling, for mainstream discourse, women means white women. And there was something about it that I thought was odd because it's also just impractical. You're not capturing as much data as you should. You're not actually getting the truth of how your world works because you're not using the right categories. So anyway, I don't know, just to say that it had to be, I don't know. I don't know a lot about
I think you answered it.
I don't know enough about the Netherlands. I find it I think the one thing I can say is that it's very safe to say that the Dutch are not warm people.
Not warm.
Yeah. They are not a warm people. Is that
Seems like we're hello.
Okay, let's give it to the room. Let's give it to the room. Yes.
Can you hear me? I think is my microphone?
Yes,
it's on. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Yes. Okay. I know you're all glad to be here. Welcome. My name is Clarice Garga. I think most of you know me and each other, which makes it kind of a friendly gathering instead of an official event, which is fine. Very warm. Yeah, very warm, John. We can be very warm as well. Yeah.
Well said. Thank you. Thanks, Nanda.
But for the people that don't know me and for the live stream, of course, the people at home watching, I'm a journalist. I work at Joop, which is an online news platform from VARA. And I also presented TV shows at AT5 for a while, and I write for several media on politics, identity politics, society, like everybody else here, basically. And also, like everybody else here, I think I'm a huge fan of Chimamanda. I think it feels like we're already friends, or going to be friends, probably, maybe. I'm very warm. I'm very warm person. I remember the first time. You probably don't remember, but that's okay. I remember the first time we met. It was at John Adams Institute when you were doing an interview on Americana, and coincidentally, my dad was here from Liberia, and I was like, Daddy, you have to come with me. You have to meet Chimamanda. And he was like, okay. So, you know, because he's like fine, and he likes lectures and all kinds of stuff. So he came with me to your interview. And afterwards, you were doing a book signing. I remember we were standing in line to get Americana signed. And then we got towards you at your table. And you were signing our books. And you were really nice. And then my dad goes, my daughter is a journalist and also a writer. And she's going to write a story about my life. Can she have your email address? I was mortified. It was horrible. I just left my body and I just stood there like frozen. But the thing was, you gave your email address. So it worked. I never used it though, but you did. I have your email address. That was, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I have your email address.
I must have been really impressed by your father.
Or intimidated, or because he was like, he didn't leave room for you to say no, which was good for me because I have your email address now. But I didn't use it, so I might do it now. But obviously, we're not here to talk about my inner fangirl. I'm going to try to curb that because it's all about you guys and about the questions you have for Chimamanda and how you experience feminism here in the Netherlands or other countries that you come from and the comparisons between the countries that we are from. I think some small huishoudelijke mededelingen in English general notice. You'll be leaving at 2:50 sharp, I've understood. But before that, there'll be a collective photo moment at 2:45 here against the window. I'm curious to see how who's going to take that picture of everybody and how we're going to do that, the logistics of it. But you're going to do that. Okay, well, then we're good. And this afternoon, you'll be giving a speech at the Brainwash Festival at the Brakke Grond, which will be broadcasted by Human this evening. And tomorrow you'll be at Buitenhof, which will be broadcasted live on Saturday. So you have a very busy schedule. She's like, really? Am I doing that? Yes.
Yeah, but I feel like there's subtext that I'm not getting. What was the
Buitenhof.
It's an important program. It's really important.
Is it one of the most leading political programs.
Wait, what?
Yes.
What? Come on.
Yes,
come
say
on.
it. We're starting. We're opening the debate. Yeah. She's been on the
Oh, I heard about you. It is such an honor.
The honor is all mine.
All right, I'll talk to her then. But I still want to know where you.
Maybe you wanted to exchange experience about Buitenhof, but you can do that later. Okay, so basically the floor is open. There are no rules except don't hog the microphone. I think everybody has questions or wants to share experiences. So just let's give each other space to do that. And also, I have to say, people at home that couldn't be here, you can ask questions on Twitter. And I guess somebody's going to shout them out here. The hashtag is Adichie. All right, so let's get it started. Well, I have the mic, so mic privilege. The first question. Let's start with that. Why are the Dutch not warm? Put you on the spot. First question.
Because I just don't think they are. You know, and I say this, sort of, when I travel, you get off the plane and there's an air, I like to call it the tone of a country. When I went to Sri Lanka, for example, I got off the plane and I fell in love. And then I met, there's just the warmth to Sri Lankans. I felt the same way in Ghana, I felt the same way in Kenya, in Mauritius.
But not here.
Not here. And it's also just little things. It's the people at the hotel, it's the cab drivers, it's
Maybe it's a sort of distance. They're more distant.
they're not.
So you-
it's a lack
agree.
of warmth. It's a lack of warmth.
Yeah.
It's and it manifests itself differently in different European. I mean, the French are not warm, but they're a bit more abrupt and a bit more. The Dutch are not. They're just not warm. They're resolutely not warm.
I think we're known for that. Oh, sorry. I think
I'm-
we're
and-
known
and
for
I-
that.
I'm a person who responds to warmth.
Yeah, I think
So
we're
it's
known
safe
for
to
that, for
say-
being neutral, very kind
Yeah,
of
there's
like
sort of a-
grounded and very.
Yeah, I mean, God bless you
Just-
all, but so that has been.
But we're
my-
gonna prove you wrong today, because everybody here is very warm and welcoming towards you. So, can you stand up, please? Oh, so everybody can see you.
Yes, it's funny because at 2009 I was at TED and there were 4 black people. You were there, I was there, Emmanuel Child Soldier, and you
Oh,
gave
wait,
the
you were
talk.
there at the Danger of the
Yes.
Cemetery? You're kidding me, really?
Yes, and after you gave your
Ah.
talk, and I saw how you felt because you can see, you could see the bit, and it was very warm, and because 5 days we were walking there, the only black people, so I ran up to you and I said, amazing talk, and you said, sister, and
Really?
and so we are warm.
Oh, I
we
love
are warm,
this. I love
and
this.
I'm Dutch.
Oh, I love this.
You just said about feminism, and we were like, I was a bit. My question is, what is feminism? In your opinion, like the definition, of course, equality. But like 2 months ago, I was in Algeria, not Nigeria, but Algeria, and it was with a room full of young people, like 4,000 young men and women. And a young girl stood up with her scarf. I was talking about female entrepreneurship, and she shouted, I'm a feminist. And I was shocked. First, I was afraid of the secret police and starting a riot. But then I went up to her and I asked her, what is feminism? What does it mean to you? And then she said, I want to start my own company and I don't want to do what my father says. So that was, and I thought, is that feminism? So I'm asking you.
Yes. You know, for me, I think, and I think that's what I was saying about thinking that there are feminisms, that there's a starting point which has to be true equality, not feminism light. So it has to be, what's going on? And, but what she said, I consider feminist because really I think feminism is always contextual. It's always about the context. You know, I think as long as the starting point is equality, real equality. So I think for this young woman, and I'm very excited actually to hear the story because I think what it is that she's saying, I want to live life on my own terms and I don't want gender to determine what I can and cannot be.
The funny thing is I was sitting on a stage with a guy from Lebanon and a guy from Morocco, and they said yes with her headscarf. So for them, the guys, that's not feminism because, so that's why I was asking this question,
Yeah, no, I
because
think
there
that-
was a whole discussion about that also.
Yeah,
She
but
couldn't
I
be a
think that-
feminist because of her headscarf.
The guys said. That's what the guys said.
Yeah, this is why guys really shouldn't be talking about it. I mean, because I think again it's contextual. I know, fiercely feminist women who choose to wear the scarf, and it's a choice. But there's situations where it's not a choice, so it's always contextual. I think there's something about the conversation about Islam in Europe that bothers me sometimes because I remember going to Paris and being asked, and this woman was sort of trying to force me to say that Islam was terrible for women. And I have problems with Islam and women. I have problems with Christianity and women. But I found myself reluctant to say that to her because I felt that she had this single narrative that she wanted to impose on me, which is to say, just tell us that Islam is terrible for women. And I said, it's not making room for some women I know in northern Nigeria, for example, who are observant Muslims, but who in that space have found a way to carve out this sort of space that allows women humanity, you know? And they wear a scarf. And yeah, I don't think there's one way, as long as it's real feminism that starts it off, not feminism light. You can tell that I have a major problem with what I call feminism light, right? And there's just so much of
Rightly
it.
so.
So much of it in Nigeria. I mean, they'll say to you, oh, no, but it's very good. Women should have. But you know that a woman must still be the person who is the homemaker. And I'm like, why? Why does she have to be the homemaker? Homemaking, it doesn't come in the vagina.
Another question here.
Hi, my name is Jessica de Abreu. I'm from New Urban Collective, and we are currently building a Black library in Amsterdam. So I feel really honored to be here. So to come back to my question, in your book you write about the non-American Black, where at the end of the day we're all Black. But then there's also this conversation about the African American and the American African. So to delve also in, I think, the previous question, do you see the difference in the feminism of, for instance, the African American or the Black European, for instance, and the women of the African continent?
Yeah. I think that the approaches are different. I think the focuses are different. I think because the problems are different. I think that my sense is that to be a Black European feminist woman is to deal with questions of inclusion in a way that Black African women don't. Black African women sometimes are much more concerned with the ways that so-called traditional traditions are used as justifications for injustice. Right? In a way that I think if you're living in Amsterdam, nobody's going to come and tell you, well, you know, your grandfather died, but you don't get that property because you have a vagina. But that is likely going to happen if you're in certain parts on the continent of Africa. I think for African Americans, just the idea of keeping yourself alive in the face of law enforcement is a feminist issue. I think in a way that it's not in Africa. So I think that the differences, and I actually do want to talk about that because sometimes I find myself feeling a little conflicted about this idea. So on the one hand, of course you should be inclusive, but I do worry that sometimes the idea of being inclusive can mean that you have to speak for everyone. And I have a problem with that. I cannot speak for everyone. I don't know what it means to be a white feminist. I think that the concerns of white feminism are valid concerns. I don't know anything about being transgender. I do know about being a Black feminist, an African feminist, an Igbo feminist, which has its own particular problems, right? A feminist raised Catholic, which has its own, I know there's certain things I know, but I can't. So I do think that the discourse on being inclusive has to be passed a bit more, I think, so that it's not so much that one person has to speak for everyone. It's that maybe we just need to have more individual voices in the room so that each person can speak of their experience. I sometimes worry. So, see, this is the reason I haven't slept. But there's the young woman in the US. I'm so sorry, I'll remember in a minute. But she's white and she's a white feminist. Her feminism is not necessarily mine, but I think it's valid. And I sometimes find myself almost being sort of protective of her because people say, well, you don't say anything about Black women. And I'm thinking she doesn't know anything about Black women. And actually, I don't want her talking for Black women, right? Because there are many Black women who can talk for themselves. If only you people will open the door and bloody let them in. So anyway, yeah.
Hi, I'm Hasna El-Madoudi. I'm her colleague. And I wanted to go back to what you just said about Paris. Because I'm from a Muslim background, I quite often am told when I speak on, I'm also a white feminist sometimes, like I'm married and I have a baby and I don't want to work part-time, so I have to earn it.
You're white?
No, not my color isn't white, but I sometimes my feminism is sometimes white.
So I was just checking if there was a different racial system in the Netherlands.
How do you do that out here?
Just checking. We learn every day. Yeah, I understand what you mean.
But I'm also Muslim, so quite often I get asked, why aren't you fighting for Muslim women's rights, and why aren't you speaking out against the burkini? And well, because I believe that I should give those women who wear a headscarf their space to be a feminist, or even not be a feminist if that's what they please. But how would you respond to right-winged people who try to hijack sometimes what feminism actually means?
Yeah, I ignore them. I don't have time. Seriously. But the only thing I would disagree with is when you said if they choose not to be a feminist, that's fine. I'm really sorry. It's not fine for me. People who say they're not feminist, it's not fine for me. I don't understand it. Because I don't understand it. What does it mean to say you're not feminist? It means you don't want to be a full human being?
No, that's the same for me, but as a
example, I was in Morocco a couple of weeks ago to visit my family, and I was telling them about how I am a feminist and what I believe, and everybody just started laughing. And in the afternoon, I figured out why, and that is because feminism or equality for women isn't their first thing on the list. The first thing on their list is to to survive and to get enough food on the table, and whether that be through being equal to their husbands or not, they don't care. They just want to survive, and that's why I sometimes believe I should give people their own space.
No, and I respect that. I just think you're a much better person than I am, I think is what I'm saying. because, and I say this because, I don't want to be dishonest and sort of pretend that I find that I don't have patience for, and I mean, what you said about it's not their first thing, yeah, but they're intertwined. I mean, the reason, their position, their gender-determined position, is part of the reason that their lot in life is as it is, right? So imagine that their society was one that gender hadn't determined the paths they could take, and gender hadn't determined how far they could go. What if, because the thing is, you're born a woman, it means that at a certain age, you have to do certain things in a certain way, and it's quite, so I think even to talk about the fact that the first choice is not, in other words, I think the undertone to this is that the idea of gender injustice is a luxury. Talking about it because, we don't have food. But they're connected. And I find that in Nigeria, for example, many women, and the other thing, speaking of right-wing people, who will come to me and say, well, this woman says she's not feminist. How about that? It means, your feminism idea has been... and I just feel like, no, it actually proves why we need feminism. Right-wing people should be ignored. It depends. If they're extreme right-wing, ignore them. If they're not, then I believe also in dialogue. I think sometimes that it's that people haven't quite thought about things in particular ways. I also think sometimes it's that people have a view of feminism that isn't necessarily, that is extreme. So sometimes people think, because I, for example, think that it's possible to have faith and feminism. I really genuinely believe that. There are many people who think that you can't, right? And so I think it maybe is also a question of finding ways to make, I don't want to say flexible because then it starts going into feminism light, but yeah, the only thing I can think about is me thinking that you said you were white. I was like, do I need to ask her to step aside so we can have a chat?
More debrief.
I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'm Justine. I'm the editor-in-chief of an online Dutch feminist platform. Hearing you talk about the dialogue, so you said sometimes it can be a solution to talk, with right-wing people about this. I was rewatching your TED Talk about feminism today, and one of the things that struck me, I started reading the comments, which you should never do, but I did.
Yeah, don't.
And there were a lot of men that commented, "Wow, this is such a great feminist. She's so positive. She's so, you said in your TED Talk, like you're positive about the ability of human beings to change social constructs." And I thought that it was a lot of tone policing, like, oh, you were so happy. And even though you said, oh, I'm also angry about how it is nowadays, how do you deal with criticism on your tone? I think a lot of women here see that happening. I think especially black women being framed as angry. How do you deal with that tone policing? And how do you, do you really think about your tone when you start talking about feminism? Is it an instrument that you use? Or are you now at the point that you're like, it should be okay to be angry about these topics?
It should be okay to be angry, but I also think, and I think it's a shame that to be female is to constantly think about managing how you portray your anger, because I've also often been called angry. So I'm actually quite pleased to hear this, because in Nigeria, for many Nigerian men, I am Madam Angry. I mean, there have been long reams of paragraphs written about how angry I am. And, sort of things like her childhood must have been terrible. That is why she's so angry. I mean, there's all of that. And when I hear of these things, I claim the anger. I'm like, yes, I am angry, right? I hope you are. We should all be fucking angry. But at the same time, there's room for laughter in my life. And and joy. And I really do feel, in general, a kind of optimism about possibilities. I really do genuinely believe that human beings can change. I believe that because I've seen that. But at the same time, I'm not sort of being very Pollyanna-ish and thinking that, we can change the world overnight. I don't think that, but I do believe in a certain kind of optimism and positivity. And there are people you can reach with dialogue and logic, and there are people you cannot. I'm interested in those people that you can reach, which is why I often say that the thrust of my feminism is persuasion. I want to get more people to come on board. And I think it can be done. And
wait for the mic. Nadia, you know this.
Yeah. But you know what? Stop reading. I hope you don't read comments about. When you write something, do you read the comments? Don't.
Yeah, I know.
It's. And don't you ever wonder who these people are? I mean, who are these people who write this? Really, honestly, I wonder about that.
They don't have anything better to do, basically.
Asha met with one once, right? I did.
You did. Can you tell us your experience? So you get a lot of online
Wait,
hate
but you haven't. She hasn't asked her.
No, but I thought it's a different question, right? Or is it? It's ongoing. Okay, let's start with your question first. Sorry, Nadia.
Wacht even voor de mic.
Excuse me. I wanted to know if you deliberately have a positive message. It's the same question she just asked. If it's really an instrument, like if you have a positive message, you're heard, and if you're angry, they just say, "Oh, that's an angry woman. Pff, we don't take her serious." Is that really something you consciously use? As a strategy?
Because I think to say that would be to say that there is a kind of deciding tone and message based on how I imagine it will be received. I don't do that. Partly because it's not that I don't care how to be received. It's that I'm willing not to be received well. Right? And I've been since I was a little girl. I've always been willing. I'm willing. I like to be liked, but I'm willing not. I'm willing to be disliked. I can live with it. I totally can. And so when I was giving that talk, I remember just saying, just speak honestly about how you feel. Just say what it is that you genuinely think. And you're going to have some people on board, and you're going to have some people who will not be on board, and that's fine. So I sort of have I also find that I'm a person who, I can be angry and I can laugh in the same space. It's my particular brand of instability.
Asha.
Oh yes. Meeting a troll. I write op-ed columns mostly for a Dutch newspaper. And I was also very concerned with being liked, and then I got so angry that I wasn't. So I started to write about feminism, and people started to threaten me and bully me online. And I remember at one point I was in a train to Amsterdam to do a TV talk show about the sexual arousal pill for women. And one of these guys, all the way in the train, he was going off like, "But she's so fat, she never has sex." And well, it was not very pretty.
Wait, he was saying this on the train?
Yeah. Now he was twittering. I was reading my Twitter timeline, and he was tweeting these things. And she doesn't even have a husband. I have 2 kids. So I could actually prove I had sex at least twice. But a couple of months later, an editor called me and said, "Do you want to write a piece about your experience on this?" And I said, "Well, okay, but I want to meet someone who says this." So I actually emailed this man who said these things like, "You never had sex because you're fat." And we decided to meet. He agreed to meet me. And he was a very regular, likable man. Also, he was very tiny. And he had this beard, like he was like a little leprechaun beard and this yellow hat on. And he liked kittens, and I like kittens. We had much in common. And now you're married.
No,
but the thing is, he told me something very important, because I thought these people generally hate me. Yeah. And they might come after me if they know where I live. They show up, baseball bats in hand, to lynch me or something. They really hate me. I'm just doing this for sport. This is fun. This is like my idea of a day out. Yeah. That was it. He said, "I'm an asshole online because I can, and you're an easy target right now because you're a fat feminist." And that was it. And besides that, which I think is something he should seriously reconsider, he was a totally normal man. So I would just like to add that I totally agree with ignoring. Because there's just, they're doing this for fun. And I was crying because it hurt.
Yeah.
Of course. So I
think it's
from now on I
fantastic that
just
you met
block
him,
and
because
ignore.
it's a learning thing.
Very
And there's something deeply sad about him. I mean, he's the one we should feel sorry for. Really? This is what he, it's... I actually have a slightly similar experience. A friend of mine who's also quite well known in Nigeria had said to me that she met a man who'd been writing a lot of rubbish about her, and she would spend weekends in bed crying, and then she met him. And it's funny you use leprechaun because she actually used the same word. And she said she looked at him, and instead she just thought, this is the reason I've been crying weekend. And I remember meeting a man who had also been just, I usually don't read these things, but I have friends who sometimes would tell me, just watch out for this guy. He's really been after you writing things, right? And then I was surprised that he then kept asking my manager for an interview when my book came out. So I thought, you know what, I'll go meet him. The first thing that struck me was how he was shaking. Just sort of looking at me, he was sort of like that. And immediately I felt sympathy for this fool. Because I thought, poor guy. Right, you spend all your time attacking me, and then you meet me and you can't even, you're shaking like a leaf. And I remember just feeling sympathy. And since then, I haven't, some things still hurt because we're human. And, especially I think for me, the most hurtful is being misunderstood. I don't really mind being criticized for what my positions are. It's when they're twisted and then I'm criticized for it that it really annoys me, But in general, after I met him, I kind of laugh a lot about. So when someone says, "Oh, they wrote something about you saying you're this and that," I'm thinking, yeah, someone like that guy, yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Hedger. I'm a columnist, and I founded a feminist platform and agency. So I wanted to ask a little bit more advice on the dilemma of ignoring or persuading cis males. We now have currently 57 women trying to break into Dutch media, and we get a lot of discussion. Should we go to a certain television show when all we get asked about is, Clarice was in Pau a few days ago talking about last night, talking about Michelle Obama's speech. And one of the women at the table criticized the fact that all the women were just talking about, were set it up to talk about how Michelle Obama presents herself. And I think the modern feminist discussion, at least for me, is a lot about subtle things and psychological things and how things are presented and how the paradigm is. But I also find it really hard to sit in a talk show and have to explain this to a white male who thinks this is soft feminism. What should we do?
I don't know.
Because we want
it's
to
funny.
break in.
What?
We want to break in, but we don't want to do it according to a male paradigm.
But what is a male paradigm? I guess that's where I also find myself. I have a problem with the idea that somehow, because we're born with vaginas, we're all somehow gentler. I don't think that's true at all. I mean, I know this from boarding school. I mean, have you been to a girls' boarding school where it's all girls? We're not all. We are very So I guess where we would disagree is the idea that there's a male paradigm. So in other words, when you say we want to break in, I think you're saying we want to break in, but we want to break in gently. And I'm saying there's no such thing. You're going to have to crash in. And one way I think would be, how about you do one of those interviews, and when you're being asked your gentle question, you give a little rant. Just plan it really well, practice in front of the mirror, be perfect at it, and go give your rant. No, I don't. I don't. I find that practicing doesn't work for me because I never do well. I mean, the times I practice, I never do well. I don't. So now, in general, also, I don't like to get questions before interviews because I become fake and false. I don't do well. But if it works for you, because there's some, and I think for something of this sort that's deliberate and not her style, I think she would need to practice because it's not, she's stepping into, it's clearly, it's not your, I'm guessing. Because if you're, in other words, I'm saying you're going to have to practice the male paradigm if you're going to use the male paradigm. I think, I'm so sorry but so I was thinking also about, there's also, I think, something I wish we would let go of a bit more, which is being grateful. I see this a lot in accomplished women. No, there's grateful. So I'm grateful to be in this space. I'm grateful that you people actually want to sit and listen to me. Seriously, I'm grateful that people buy my books. I still am in wonder. But there's the other kind of grateful, which is being even grateful that I also think that my book is worth reading, if that makes sense. But the reason I'm grateful is because I know that there are other people whose books are worth reading who haven't been read as I've been read, right? But I don't think my gratitude doesn't come from a place of, I wrote nonsense and they're reading me. No, I don't think I wrote nonsense. I think a lot of women who are very accomplished. So I just thought about the American vice presidential debates, which was hosted by a woman, a Hispanic woman. And I remember just watching her thinking, stop being so grateful. You're an accomplished journalist. I just felt that there was too much gratitude, and that her gratitude came from this place of, I shouldn't be here and I'm here. And I was thinking, no, you should be there, So I think that's more, when I say that male paradigm, maybe we need, if that idea of I should be here is a male paradigm, then we better bloody take it on,
Yes. Hi, my name is Anusha Nzume, and it's so great to hear you say that, because I'm half West African, Cameroonian, my dad, and he studied in the Soviet Union. That's where he met my mom. And she's a Russian white feminist, always has been. And what's interesting about my upbringing, because my dad was anti-colonial, socialistic, and my mom as well, that starting my life as a really young girl in Russia, I really got instilled the power of women and not having to be nice, because Russian women are not considered to be friendly. Russian people were warm. They don't, because Russians, for instance, don't smile on the street, and people are always very critical of that because they take you seriously. And so as a woman, it's very normal to speak like I speak now, in a serious, maybe harsh even tone, and that's not held against you. So in my upbringing, that helped me a lot. I was never afraid in that sense to let my voice be heard the way it is. And I want to really give that to all the young women and to all the women here. We are here now together. We can all take this on now and stop with apologizing, being grateful, and changing our tone. No, use your tone. And that's a pride, and it will shift, because we're, especially with social media, with all the tools we have now, we can shift this I swear, in a few months.
I agree. And also, she's very positive. A few months, I would say a few years. And also I think just basic competence. My experience, anecdotally, of course, I don't have statistics, is that the women I've dealt with in general, in different places of work, generally are more competent than the men, but the men generally think that they are better. Right? So just...
Let's check the man later on.
Maybe he's the exception. That's the thing. If he's in a circle like this, he's probably one of us. So, it's the other kind of men. But, so I think just on the level, so often I'll say to young women in Nigeria, excellence is your answer, because you're already excellent. So go there and speak up, because and the thing I've found is that it's sad that I think being female means often you have to earn respect, you have to, and it's not assumed when you walk in a room. But if we earn it now with excellence, maybe our daughters won't have to. But I have to say that I still feel a lot of resentment for people who see me, assume certain things, and maybe hear me speak or realize who I am and they change. I don't like such people, because I just feel like I want you to see me and assume ability and assume capability, and don't expect me to earn it first. But that's why we need feminism. It's the lot of women.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because I'm curious as to what if your innate nature is that you are that soft-spoken person, and that is your manner of, that is your brand of feminism, as you call it.
Yeah, that's why you have to go to a mirror and practice.
Go to a mirror and practice.
Because but exactly. You know what though? And I don't want to be flippant, because I know people are different. But the thing is that change doesn't happen. Nobody, and you look at history and study how, just study history and change. People don't just wake up and say, come take my privilege. You need to
grab it, go get it.
Yeah, or at least have a tussle. You have to. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Nigerian men about certain things, and often it doesn't end well, but I have them because I'm like, no, we need to have this talk. Right. We need to. And it's not the most pleasant thing. And would I rather sort of have a nice chat and have a glass of wine? I guess, but I just think, no, we need to talk about why you get to break the collar knot and I don't. And it often doesn't end well.
Wacht even.
Je had ook een vraag. Ja, een andere vraag. Oké.
Well, you were just talking about the men. I'm always curious. What do you think is the role of men in feminism? Like you just said, you were talking to Nigerian men saying they should be. I don't know, because I always think that's a part of feminism that's kind of. Well, I don't know. I do have faith in men. Seeing men and women as equal. Like my father, for instance, with my upbringing, my parents weren't together, but he insisted he would take half of the time taking care of me, not because he thought it was feminist, but just because he was my father and he wanted to, have me for half of the time. And what do you think about men in feminism?
I think men should be. I think men are feminists. I think more men should be feminists. I'm not one of those feminists who think that to be feminist you have to be born with a vagina. And I also think that it's important. I think one of the things we often don't engage with enough is the sort of the anti-feminist female movement, right? That the many women who do not like women and do not want women's advancement. I mean, it's not just saying it's a personal choice for them. They actually actively walk against it. Men, I think, are important. I mean, I have often said that my little brother Kene, well, little younger, because he's very tall, is just a wonderful feminist, and I'm so proud of him because the way that he points out subtle things, because often, sometimes well-meaning men can be very annoying. Sometimes when men are explaining to you why something isn't sexism, but they're coming from a place of, I believe in equality, but here's why you're wrong about that. I think is just not feminist. When they tell you think it's feminist, but let me tell you why it's actually not about gender, and you're just like, no, I get to decide what's about gender. By the way, white women also do it to black women when they tell them it's really not race. Black women are like, hello. But no, but I think men are part of it. I think men are. My brother Kene is a wonderful feminist. How old is he? Kene was born in 1980. So how old does that make him?
36.
Yeah. And what I love is it's that it's that we're watching the debates, for example, Hillary Clinton, and just the subtle things he'll point out, the way that she's asked a question, just really, and it just stuns me, and it makes me very proud. And I also love how he gets really intensely angry about double standards, and how he'll shut his friends down.
That's perfect.
Yeah, he really. It should, and some men, but not enough. I'm also married to a man who's a fantastic feminist. It's sort of quieter, but in a way, he's. What I also like is when men, it's just natural. He doesn't think, for example, that the fact that he does domestic work or that we equally share childcare means that he should get brownie points. Because that also really is very annoying. Like, well, I took care of the baby. Well, yeah, come take a cookie. It's your baby. So I'm married to a man who's not like that at all. So I feel like there's a bit of hope. I was going to say my father is, but that's not true. My father is a wonderful progressive man, but he's still an Igbo man of a certain generation.
I have a question here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Janice Dill. I'm a lifestyle journalist and a fashion activist. And I'm also the writer of a book about black hair. It's called Little Black Hair Book.
Really?
Yes, and I would love to give you a copy later on. It's in Dutch, but it has also great pictures. You can take a look at them, of course. My question is about hair, as I said before. We see in fashion lots of Caucasian models rocking black hairstyles like cornrows and boxer braids on the catwalk. But we hardly see any black models working that looks in media or in magazines. And do you think it's a problem for regular Caucasian women to wear black hairstyles like cornrows and so on? Or do you think, well, it's all about mixing and matching in fashion, so what's the problem?
Well,
appropriation or not?
The conversation about appropriation, for me, first of all, I should say it's not one that it doesn't get me terribly excited. But I think, by the way, I think you have the most incredible, just look. You just, I just feel like I feel like I want to photograph you and hang it on my wall. You're just incredible looking. I think I sort of roll my eyes often when I see or you open a magazine and they're like, the new look for fall is the braid. And I just sort of roll my eyes often because I just think, come on. But then on the other hand, to say that somehow white women should, by the way, I mean, you go up 200 years ago, white women actually did French braids and did the braid. They actually did their own version of braids. So I think the larger thing, though, is what does the mainstream value? I think that's really what the question is. And what I would like to see more is not so much, I don't want to see it as this cool fetish. I wish it were, if white women would actually wear braids and wear braids to walk, and braids would be seen as norm and valued, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think that there's a sense in which it becomes sort of the cool thing that you put on for the season, and then it's no longer, and that I kind of feel uncomfortable about. And partly also because what it does is that it makes this then seem odd and out of the ordinary. I mean, I just did a shoot for, I did a beauty campaign which comes out soon. Ooh. And I had said to them, well, you need to get somebody who can do natural hair. And they're like, oh, sure, she's a great hairstylist. So they brought this woman who was lovely. Of course, she had no idea what to do with my hair. And when I then told the woman who had set it up, white woman, I said to her, the hairdresser can't do my hair, so I have to do my hair myself. And she said, can she really not do your hair? Or do you just prefer to do your hair yourself? Which is the white female equivalent of mansplaining. So she was explaining my own experience to me. And I said to her, no, she cannot do my hair. And I think even more important, it's important for you to widen your understanding of hair, Because I think she felt she knew black hair because she knew this kind. But it's different, right? And I said to her, you need to understand not only the different shades in which black people come, but the different textures in which black hair comes, because otherwise, and I think that what your question is pointing at is this kind of, the season is the braid, makes it almost impossible to actually engage with the real complex reality of the ranges of black hair. And that's where my problem comes.
I'm sorry, we have 2 more questions because we're running out of time. So just you, and you raise your hand as well.
Hi, my name is Helene Christel. I am a student writer. I'm mostly a humble colleague of all these amazing women here.
She rocks, though.
Totally. Thank you. So my question is, I'm a little bit nervous, sorry.
It's okay.
My question is about, so we've been talking about being black in the Netherlands, but we haven't really been talking about growing up being African in the Netherlands. And it's a thing a lot of these women relate to in this room. Growing up African in the Netherlands means you almost go unseen, unheard. You're like the invisible minority. It also means that as a young African girl growing up in the Netherlands, there's a lot of things like sexism and paternalistic growing up and upbringing that goes unseen, the red flags that go unseen, which makes it even harder for African girls to grow up here. My question is how to invite feminism into an Afropean home, in your opinion.
Oof. Good question. Yeah. This is one of those really good questions that I don't have the answer to. But I'm actually really fascinated now about, So, and tell me, so when we talk about, because I'm also interested in the diversity within Black Dutch,
We need another afternoon.
There's...
Hold on.
And all kinds of.
Where would to sort of have ancestry in Suriname? What when is that what you mean by Caribbean?
Yes,
okay.
But all the Netherlands, the Dutch Antilles, because we were colonies of the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So a lot of Caribbean people from the Dutch colonies came here to study or to live and work here.
As they should.
And then we have people from Africa, which are 54 countries, I think. So we have a whole diverse group of African people who came to work, study, but also we have a large group of refugees, like from Ethiopia, Eritrea. Hélène is from Rwanda. So that's it's a very diverse group.
But you do get lumped together though as sort of like your
Right.
story when you go to America, you're
Right.
just black, and that's the
Right.
same thing here.
Right.
There's no individuality in your blackness or your
but
background.
but that's for people looking from the outside, right? That's for people who are not black. Is that?
Well, what's not
Ah.
been explained though is
Yeah.
that there's a lot of tension between those different groups.
Yeah.
I think that's really an issue.
Yeah.
That is really something that we should start a discussion
Yeah.
on, because it's a very uncomfortable discussion.
Yeah.
But it needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that's what you're
Yeah.
speaking to,
Yeah.
actually.
I think it's
right?
kind of similar in England as well,
Yeah.
because there's even in that there's privilege that some voices have a bit more access, right? There's a lot we need to fix in the damn world.
Yeah, my name is
So
Prince.
my sister, I wish I knew
Yeah.
the answer, but I can just say that just listening to you and looking at you, maybe that's the answer. Just to keep being and to keep, I just feel that you already just seem so impressive, and you're African Dutch, so it means that if you exist, that there's a way to get feminism into the, because I just feel like you're the answer. And I also think that you shouldn't be too, you're probably never going to change your father or your uncle, and it's fine, right? I've given up I adore my father, I'm a daddy's girl, but there's some things that we just will always disagree on. My father and I have had arguments, and I just have decided to let it go. But, time is precious. I adore him. And it's not going to make me any less of a feminist. I deeply disagree with him. He thinks a man is always head of the family. I deeply disagree. But I adore him. And sometimes you make peace with that and try and change things that you can change. Yeah. So good luck to you.
Still an answer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi, my name is Princess Atria. I'm also part of New Work Collective, and at the moment I also in a group of women of color. That's actually a small group of women that we come together and we discuss different topics and we try to empower each other. We last had a meeting about entrepreneurship, and we discussed everything about that actually. And currently I'm doing my internship at the Dutch government at the Ministry of Social Affairs and Employment on anti-black racism. That's my my case, what I'm working about. I also had actually a similar question as Helene, so that was very nice that you introduced that already, because what I want, I changed my question now, but what I also am very interesting is how can you, I don't know, how do you also try to inspire other women, especially women from the continent Africa, because I'm from Ghana, my parents are from Ghana, that also has that religious aspect, because lots of Ghanaians, also in the Netherlands, they are organized, but they are also only organized like in church. And then you also have the aspect as, the man is always the head of the family, women, you have to know your place, etc., etc. How can you try to also start that spark in those women and my fellow sisters actually, to try to engage them and get them also on that boat where you were talking about?
Oh, that's even more difficult. Because what you say is true, I think, for all over sub-Saharan Africa, that there's this, and I think I actually like to think of it as a kind of strain of fundamentalist Christianity that is different from the Christianity I grew up with, because it's much more Pentecostal and it's much more inflexible, and I think it's also more misogynistic. So, and I think one way to do it, which is why I say the idea of feminism within faith traditions, is to go and study scripture. Because the thing about this movement is that they're selective in what so they'll pick out something and say, well, here it says it should be quiet in the church. I would suggest you go find another section where it says, well, here it says the woman did something. I mean, it's kind of funny, but I feel like I actually have a friend who's a priest who's been doing that a bit. I went through a phase, because I grew up Catholic, so I went through a phase of sort of studying scripture to find things that support it. But at some point I was like, it's exhausting, I don't want to do this. But I think for a person for whom scripture is important, I think that's a possible thing to do, which is, because scripture is the authority, you cannot discard it for the people. It means something central to them. So if they're going to select little bits that say things, that you find your bits to select as well. That's one of the wonderful things about the Bible. I think you can use it to justify almost anything.
Amen to that.
Actually, we've come to there's one more question, so I'll leave it to you. There's one more small question, and she's really pleading with me, so I'm just, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
I'm
of
just gonna
course.
give her a
So it's not actually a question, but actually I think I can speak for myself. It's a pretty, for me, a really inspiring moment because there's a lot of feminists, of women of African descent, black feminists in this room. And I heard a lot about these different realities. And I think it's also a good moment to invite a conversation about for instance, my first question, the different feminism in the African American, the Black European perspective, and the women of the continent. So I would like to invite us all to have this conversation.
I hope somebody sort of sends me a message to let me know how it went, because I think
send you an essay.
Yeah, here's my email. Because I do agree with you. I think it's important. I think because sometimes the problem, I think there's so much time spent in shutting each other down, sort of saying, well, you haven't spoken for so and so. And I just feel that if we get more voices in the room and talk about, and also I think accept the ways in which our experiences differ. And also recognize that just because they differ doesn't make them any less valid, you know? That if you're on the continent, you might be a lot more just absorbed in the ideas of, for example, in Nigeria, that if you cannot give citizenship to if you're a woman and you marry a man, he can't become a Nigerian citizen, which is absurd, right? So I can see some Nigerian women just being hung up on that, and it's fine. But then a woman who lives in the Netherlands might be hung up on the fact that, I don't know, she hasn't been asked to come to Buitenhof, whatever the hell that's called. Did I get that right?
Buitenhof.
Oh, Buitenhof.
Almost, yeah.
Almost, though.
But you know what I mean? So just to say that that diversity, that sort of just, I think it's, and also to realize, I think also, I mean, not being white, I don't know, so I guess my white sisters can tell me, but I feel as though white feminism also has diversity.
Of course.
Right, that there isn't, and that it's important to acknowledge that, because sometimes I think that black feminists talk about white feminism as though it's one thing, and it's not, because I have two white American feminist friends who hate what the other stands for in feminism. They're just like, and I love watching, so I'm like, good fighting. Because they come from the same starting point of wanting equality, but they really have very different, fiercely different approaches. So anyway, just to say that, but can I really just say that there's just something for me that is affirming, deeply affirming about being here. It's just deeply personally affirming for me to be here in this space with you, and I thank you, really. I really thank you. It means a lot to me.
May I take this opportunity, Chimamanda, to thank you once again. It has been very affirming for all of us, I'm sure. And talking about diversity, I mean, that was really a remark to my heart about diversity in white feminism, because as a white feminist, I feel it touches me when you say that the Dutch are cold, because I very much agree with that. But quite honestly, I have, in the Netherlands, we say all good things come in three. So I have three kinds of presents for you. Books, bag, and bakery. And I want to start with the bakery, because that's the diversity part. It's a little detour I'm making, because I'm originally coming from a part of the Netherlands, the south, where we pride ourselves to be very different from these cold northerners. And because we think that we are more hospitable, so that's why I want to start with the bakery part. It's a tin. It's a tin we had made specially for Atria when we celebrated our 80th birthday, and it has a very Dutch thing in it called stroopwafels.
Yes, I know what these are.
Oh, you know it, okay. Okay.
I have been given this before. Wait, who said again?
Then, before going to the series, I have the bag part, kind of banal, but it's Dutch. And it says, it's a quote from an 18th century novelist, white woman, but she says, ik heb geen talent voor ondergeschiktheid, which means I have no talent for subservience. So we thought this is a bag.
Suits you.
It suits you, definitely.
Thank you.
And it may help you to carry the more serious gifts. 2 books, one of which is of an author present here in the audience that we are all proud of. And I'm very serious, we're all proud of Gloria Wekker, who wrote her book White Innocence.
Thank you for this. It's funny because I was going to get it because I've heard so much.
Oh,
So
good.
thank
well,
you.
we are
Thank
really
you.
happy because she, with her work, sparked off a debate that is ongoing till this very day. It is we are very grateful for that. And then there is a more modest book which gives you a sense of the kind of archival work we're doing here, Traveling Heritages. So I hope the bag will help.
Yeah, I think it
to
will.
carry it.
Thank you so much for that.
Before inviting everyone to come and stand with your back to the sidewalk to make the picture, let me not forget to thank the Bezige Bij for making this possible. Thank you for coming, obviously, I said that already. Thank you all for being here and sharing your stories, because I think this is where it starts. And as you all know, Atria is deeply committed to continue these kind of dialogues. So we hope to invite you and see you soon again. I also want to thank Fellow Media, the people from Fellow Media, to making the live stream possible. Clarice for her moderating. Simone again for your column. And last but not least, Nancy Yao for the interviewing. So please come. Please come forward, because we know that Chimamanda really needs to leave shortly.
Sorry, I want.
Oh, be careful. Oh. Wait. You're plugged in still. I think Gloria must come forward. Yes.
Shall I see it? Yes.